Okay, hey everybody, to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have actually a really cool comparison for you guys from the brand Monta. A little about them. They were founded back in 2015. They are Swiss made, and they're pretty much just a micro brand startup with an eye on the entry level luxury market, which they have really been dominating in so many ways in terms of independent micro brands. Now, in terms of the type of watch, this is a traveler's watch. Some key characteristics and design. When you're looking for something you can travel with, of course, you're going to want that GMT or world timer function, so you're able to track multiple time zones with relative ease. This is their Skyquest, and you can get these for $24.35 direct from the brand. And I'm a little late to the party when it comes to reviewing this particular model, but not late to the party when it comes to Monta. I personally own at least 3 that I can think of right off the top of my head. And yeah, and they pretty much are staples and mainstays within my own personal collection. And I'm very impressed with them. And they're probably some of my most worn pieces in terms of micro brands. You guys know I'm a big Seiko fan and now Grand Seiko. But even as I have grown within kind of my collecting journey to appreciate more higher end watches, Monta has kept up, and that's because they were honestly so far ahead of the game for the most part in terms of the luxury level of fit and finish that they've been able to apply. Now, these particular Skyquest models are part of kind of an update and a change within their general design aesthetic that I think personally was made to appeal more to the masses. I think now that the word is out about Monta, people know what they're doing is very high quality. I think there's less shock value needed in terms of design, and they can do some things that I feel like are a little bit more tame, but also a lot more classic and timeless. So they'll have a little bit more staying power, which ultimately is something when you are an independent brand and you find yourself, continuing to be successful, you're going to want to think about longevity as well. So I think that's great for them. The team is great. Justin is awesome. Also Mike. So with all that said, bit of a long intro. Let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys. So, today it's really going to be about Coke versus Pepsi and which one is for you, really, if you're on the fence. I don't know if I'm going to be able to convince you that these are the GMT watch for you in general, but in terms of, hey, if you're looking at Monta and you're just trying to decide which one to get, it's great to see how these play. And of course, I think take a bit of insight into the decisions that were made from a design standpoint, from a manufacturing standpoint. So let's get that right out of the way. Actually, I can say one, but we'll start with some of the things that are different about this generation versus previous generations of the Skyquest model. Now, the previous generations did have ceramic inserts, and they had these more, I'd say, 3D kind of markers, and I believe a sloped chapter ring with some cutouts, if I remember correctly, which a lot of folks found to be more complex and ultimately, more polarizing, right? As not everybody was with that, although people could appreciate the efforts and the level of quality. So here you're seeing a bit of a change of gears, things being a little bit more simple, but refined. I will say that I prefer the look of these aluminum inserts. They look way better. The color choices, the color options, and honestly, I do have a previous generation Ocean King that does have the ceramic bezel insert. It's nice and everything, but that exposed lume also is able to kind of slightly discolor, and which captures your eye. And I think these, in terms of aesthetics, sure, they can wear and they can be damaged and whatnot, but so can ceramic. And then also ceramic is quite glossy. I think the matte choices on here, are very, very nice. The colors of red that they chose, the color of blue, the gilt accents are very, very nice. So everything flows really, really well from a design perspective, which I can absolutely appreciate. Although, these are going to be less dynamic, I think overall they have a more crowd-pleasing aesthetic. And yes, there are some folks that are going to like the older generations better. Good news for them is that all those units still exist. So if they want the older one, they can always buy the older one. And if you're interested in the newer one, I would think that, the newer models probably have a little bit more broad appeal. So they're probably moving a little bit faster in terms of folks purchasing them. So a little bit about the dimensions here. We'll go ahead and, since they're exactly the same, we'll use this beautiful kind of gilt Pepsi model to showcase the overall dimensions. 40.7 millimeters in diameter, and then it's 11.8 millimeters thick with a 47.4 millimeter lug to lug, 316L stainless steel, brushed and polished, flat sapphire with about 7 layers of AR coating. Very, very nice. In terms of this bidirectional rotating 24-hour bezel, ooh, amazing action. 48 click, which is exactly what you want to have when you do have one of these bezels. So this is correctly done. I know a lot of the times folks will just kind of slap on 120 click and just leave the same mechanism from the diver that the watch is based on, but here they did it right, and this action is fantastic. There's no play whatsoever. It's nice and crispy and tactile while still being quite smooth. So I like this very much. I mean, I'm having a good old time just fidgeting with this, if you will. So very, very nice action from that perspective. And again, it's the way that it should be. If there's 48 hours and you have 24 hours with a 48-hour click, that means you can do half-hour increments, right? So there are some time zones which are separated by half an hour. So that actually addresses that. Now, in terms of the movement inside, let's get to the crown. Screw down crown, nicely signed, and then of course an open display back where you can see this movement, which is pretty much going to be known as the Monta Caliber M23 or the Sellita SW330. It depends on, of course, the availability, so that's why they switched to the M23 nomenclature, but they pretty much have a great relationship with Sellita, so you're going to typically find Sellitas in here. The nice things about having the Sellita movement is you do get that extended power reserve of 56 hours. Also, you're getting that nice smooth 4 hertz sweep or 28,800 vibration per hour beat rate, which is fantastic. And typically these are going to be running within plus or minus 5 seconds a day. So that is very, very nice. And especially when you're at this price point, did I mention the price point? $24.35 direct, which isn't cheap, but honestly isn't unattainable or anything like that. I mean, obviously it depends on your budget. There are folks that don't want to pay over $1,000 for any type of watch. But I will say, for those of you that are used to kind of purchasing within this price point, $3,000 and up, and understanding some of the trade-offs and the things that you gain and the things that you lose in terms of return on your investment at this price point, you basically will be either completely happy with the fit and finish of this, or you will be absolutely blown away because you're either going to feel like this is overly nice, or you've actually, you've tested some really nice pieces, and you're going to know that this also is very, very nice. I will say within that price point into the $3,000 to $5,000 range, there are quite a few brands where it's really just about the brand. It's branding and the quality isn't necessarily there. And it's not to say that those other brands that don't have the upscale quality to go with the upscale price, it's nothing against them. A lot of them are tool watches anyway, and there's a lot of people that really don't appreciate luxury finishes or aspects of a watch. But if you're one of those people, let's say you're used to buying Tag Heuer or Breitling, you're going to see this piece and you're going to be blown away that you can get it under $3,000. If you are somewhere and you're just a really mid-tier connoisseur, and you just spend within that space, and you're really value forward, and you're buying some of these brands that might not be such big names but do offer very high level of quality, you're gonna be also impressed. Because I having trouble thinking of anything for the price that's new anyway, that could even compete with something like this in terms of the level of fit and finish and tolerances. And again, that's if you're looking for something that is going to be luxurious. Now, I've just been gabbing for just too long, so we'll just jump back into the details. Now, you're going to get this matte black dial, applied indices, date at 6 o'clock, which is a real crowd favorite these days. Polished sword hands, these are rhodium plated in this case, with the gilt finish on top of that as well. And then yeah, this thing's gorgeous. BGW9 Super Luminova, of course it's Swiss. 300 meters or 100 feet of water resistance, 20 millimeter lugs, down to a 16 millimeter taper. And you're going to get this solid flip lock style clasp with toolless quick adjust, which is great. And you do get 3 positions on this. So just to give you a look there, it's very smooth and very refined, and it's refined because they've refined it over time. This wasn't their first crack at this. They've really been kind of in the business of doing things right for quite some time, and I really do love this colorway. So for me, it's going to be the Pepsi. Although I can definitely see the appeal of the Coke. There's something that is for me, this actually screams very 80s. Because it just reminds me of those GMT Master 2 references, where I feel like that was just, still very beautiful, very versatile, more versatile, I would say, by comparison. But yeah, to me, this is more kind of that 80s style, and it looks really great. Don't get me wrong. And then this just, it's weird because obviously the gilt, these accents are meant to make it look older. But for me, it kind of does this weird thing where it has a bit of a juxtaposition in between old and new that really fires on all pistons for me. And it really just comes together and gives it a very unique look. When I look at this, I don't necessarily think of another watch reference immediately. And it's not to say that these don't really look that, if you really pay attention to the details, these don't really look that much like any other watches. Yes, they do have commonalities that are going to be there, but they're typically those same commonalities across so many other references. So it's tough to kind of debate from that perspective. But with that said, let's actually get these on the wrist and see how they wear. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears fantastic. Of course, if I was to get it a little too close to the camera, you're going to get a bit of lens distortion, and it's going to make the watch appear larger on the wrist than it actually is. So what I can do is just lay my wrist nice and flat here, and then just tighten up the frame so you guys can still get a detailed look while just getting a bit of a truer aspect ratio of how this lays on the wrist. Check out how flat that is. I love that they really compartmentalized the thickness of this watch by having that very thin mid case, and then that proud and quite grippy and easy to engage with bezel there. It just it flows really, really beautifully, and it distributes the weight really well on the wrist. And this thing just looks quite killer. And of course, with the flatness, I'd say, of what's within the dial does kind of key in to a simpler, more modern aesthetic. And at the end of the day, this isn't a dive watch. It isn't a deep diver either. So having it be a little bit flatter, a little bit crispier, I think it does help it speak to a bit of a more modern time. And then if we take a look on the other wrist, here we go. Little Coke action for you. This is just fantastic. Very, very clean, super versatile here, guys. This essentially is 2 watches in one. If you think about it, it is absolutely good enough to be a dive watch for you. And at the same time, it does have the secondary time zone capabilities. And one of the great things about these movements are, of course, they've been around for quite some time. They're tried and tested. There's nothing experimental about them. And you know that they're good to go. They're also quite thin, which helps with that very thin profile. And yes, these are office or or collar style GMTs, which have been around forever, and they work really, really well, especially if you're not necessarily jet set traveling. The nice thing is you can set these, and it's a lot more intuitive for you to just track a secondary time zone, and maybe not one that you're in, versus tracking your home, your home time zone while you're out abroad. So different use cases work differently, and of course you do get some benefits like a quick adjust date window there, which you do get with a office or caller style GMT versus a traveler's style GMT, where essentially you're going to have to just make the rounds with that local hour hand to get the date to go back and forth. So very, very nice, guys. I'm just loving this look here. I gotta say, as much as I do prefer the blue with the gilt, this definitely is a charmer. And if I saw this on somebody's wrist, I'd still be pretty jealous of it. So with that said, let's go ahead, get set up for some Lume shots, a light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, that BGW9 is fantastic. Now, you don't get the Lume at the 12 o'clock, which is fair for, of course, a traveler's watch, not a dedicated diver, although it does have the same water resistance as their dedicated diver. So as terms of kind of that go anywhere, do anything, everyday sports watch, that's probably where it fills, more of those boxes. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is, man, that Lume, let me just turn that back off. This Lume is outstanding. Look how punchy that is. That is, whew, man, I like that. It's applied well, great surface area, but also thick enough to where you're getting full advantage of that great compound. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is a bit of low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or maybe just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, to maybe even include some harsh lighting that might expose any type of production defects. But all you're going to see here is a couple of wear and tear marks, of course, because these are traveling press loaners here that I'm sure found themselves on quite a few wrists at this point, since these were released quite a while ago. But they're still looking quite pristine, and it probably gives you a nice idea of what this will look like after you wear it for a couple of years or months, maybe probably closer to a couple of months versus years. But these still look great, and you can see the way the light bounces and plays off of here. Really fantastic. That nice luxury level brushing. It's just very, very uniform as the light glides right over it. Definitely a finer level of brushing than you're going to find in your typical tool watch. And if for some of you that makes it worth it, and for others you don't, you're not even thinking about that. You just kind of want a hunk of steel on you, and you want it to work and tell you the time. So with that said, let's go ahead, get the lights back on, get to some closing thoughts. Okay, guys, on the wrist, classic, perfect proportions, really very comfortable and balanced wear, especially when you consider the fact that you do have that toolless quick adjust, and then you're also getting 2 half links with each bracelet. So that's fantastic. In terms of the model variants, there's the Coke or the Pepsi gilt as seen, but it's also available in a white and gilt kind of Pan Am style limited edition, or a solid all black dial and bezel option. So you lose the bicolor style, and I could see why a lot of people might like that too. For me though, I think the bicolor bezel is something that is very eye-catching and engaging, and if you're going to have something with a rotating bezel, you might as well kind of play into that. It's basically to show the day night, so AM PM, right, 6 to 1800. So very, very cool. And so they have plenty of options. In terms of comparable models, I mean, these are really a solid alternative to these, $4,300 Tudor Black Bay GMTs for nearly half the cost, right? And I think these also have better proportions in terms of the way that they wear. So then on the other side, on the independent side, you could get something like, let's say, maybe a Formex Reef GMT for a similar price point, but I would say a lot more polarizing modern aesthetic, right? And I like the way those look. The construction is also very good. They do some things that are a little bit more complex than Monta does. But complex doesn't always mean better for a lot of people, right? Some people do like those simple things. So that's really just kind of a question of taste and preference. But in terms of build quality and everything like that and value for money, those would be in a similar lane. So for me, guys, bottom line, Monta have really tapped kind of into the huge amount of popularity that make their watches both desirable as kind of grail level pieces for those looking within the affordable independent space, as well as kind of quality, trusted daily options for traditional luxury collectors. And this newer Skyquest marks another milestone in the evolution of Monta's success story. And I'm really happy to finally get my hands on these and share them with you guys. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.